Welcome to the Grow Strong Leaders podcast. I'm your host, Meredith Bell, and I interview business leaders who are committed to their own growth and the development of everyone on their team. If you enjoy my podcast, be sure to subscribe and rate it on your favorite podcast platform. Welcome back to another episode of the Grow Strong Leaders podcast. I'm your host, Meredith Bell, and I want to kick things off with a question for you today. Do you have a mindfulness practice? If you don't, or if you're not even sure what that is, you're in for a treat today because you're going to learn what it is and why it's important. And to help explain this to you is my wonderful guest, Pamela Stambaugh. Pamela, welcome to my show.
Thank you, Meredith. It's delightful to be here with you today. Thank you.
You know, I'm so excited about the conversation we're going to have. Pamela and I went through an online course together, and we quickly discovered that we were kindred spirits in so many areas, like our values and like our focus on leadership development. And we've just continued to uncover common ground as we have had additional conversations. And she is a wealth of experience and information that's going to be so valuable today. So before we jump into that, Pamela, I want to introduce you in a more formal way to my listeners. Pamela is the president and founder of Accountability Pays, Inc., a certified woman-owned business. She has an MBA and is an ICF-certified executive coach. Recently, Pamela has begun to create products based on her learnings from coaching senior leaders and their teams for more than 25 years. She's worked with clients from diverse industries, including construction, medical devices, financial services, and manufacturing. Her clients have included companies like GE Healthcare, Abbott, and the San Diego Convention Center Corporation. Pamela maintains her mindfulness by participating in personal transformation courses provided by Landmark Education and maintaining spiritual and athletic practices. So, Pamela, before we get into what is mindfulness, I would love for you to share a little bit about your own journey to discovering that and talking about the work you've been doing over the years.
Absolutely. And it starts even earlier than that because my father was an Episcopal minister and a psychologist. And I like to say the apple didn't fall far from the tree. So although I've been on my own spiritual journey and not necessarily still in the church that I was raised in, I have definitely kept my practices in place. And I became a practitioner, which is someone who is trained to do prayer work on behalf of people who are seeking it. And I always do my own prayer work. Well, I should say always. I say my practice is to give myself my earliest morning hour, to read or meditate or do prayer work, right? Being gratitude, etc. So I'm very steeped from an early age on an appreciation that we are creatures on the earth with a purpose that's greater than ourselves. That's what I say.
That's great. And so thinking about how you've brought that to your work and how you decided working with leaders and helping them discover mindfulness, what brought you to that point as part of your process?
Right. So you mentioned Landmark Education. I had already been an executive coach. I knew that was the area that I wanted to be in. Started in marketing and said, no, I really don't care about teaching people how to market. I really care about people. And where is the greatest impact that I could make would be by working with people who work with people. Right. So and culture rolls downhill. So where could I make the most difference is by helping leaders lead. And so in one of those advanced landmark education courses that I took, we worked on purpose. And what is the purpose that I say and live into as a possibility for the world? That I provide value there. And I established my purpose that leaders lead with integrity, with love, and listen for people's greatness. And that if that were there, then the world would be a better place. Everyone would be experiencing trust and willing to give their discretionary effort and be rewarded for that in meaningful ways. We all want to be a part of something greater than ourselves. That's one of our human drives. So I wanted to enhance that potential.
Love that purpose statement. So powerful. And you're right. If every leader were to adopt and be that, it would just be amazing. Every workplace would be such a wonderful environment.
Wouldn't it?
Let's look at how you define mindfulness. What does that word mean for you, and how you internalize it for yourself and then also use it with clients?
Yeah. So for me, mindfulness is how you show up. It's operating in the background at all times. We can bring it forward and be conscious about it. And the way I say that is to be accountable, awake, and aware. So when something comes out our mouth, we want to think about how is that being received. And when we listen, we want to listen for the value. And I know, and you know, that when you criticize or you make someone wrong, the natural mechanism is to stop listening for value. And then you've, as a leader, if you make someone wrong, you've lost that trust, and you've lost the opportunity to make a difference, and you've lost the connectedness that we all want.
Mm-hmm.
So the accountable, awake, and aware is key. And then it's where you start on the journey to connect, because leaders can say, I need my team to do this, this, and this to provide productivity and performance. And when they start there, they miss the beingness that makes all of that easy, makes all of it connected. And then what they want are the results. But if they've missed step one, it's like building a house without the foundation. It's rocky. It's unpleasant. It has surprises and accidents and unintentional consequences.
Well, let's talk about that foundation, the be, because you've got this model, be, do, have. And so what you were just describing is somebody trying to get to have before they get to the be. And so they can reverse things. And really, the being is so critical. I'm so aligned with that. And I would love for you to talk a little bit more about, what does that really look like? What are we talking about when we say you need to focus on your being? Because of course, the doers among us are going, well, what do I have to do to be?
Exactly. So if you think about a focus point, you think about who do I trust, right? Because when trust is present, it's palpable, but it's an invisible force. And who trusts me? And you know, but it's an invisible force. So the power is actually in the unseen, as being is in the unseen. So when we think about how we show up, we might think that we're covering up that we're upset, that it doesn't show on our face, that it doesn't show in our posture, that it doesn't show in our attitude, in how we're holding our bodies. All of that is subconscious and very, very visible, but we don't give it the weight that it actually carries in the consequences and in the outcomes of our dynamics. And, you know, managers, leaders spend 70% of their time in communication if they're if they're doing what they're supposed to be doing, right? That
Mm-hmm.
beingness of how they relate, the kinds of questions they ask, whether they're interested in the other person, whether they care. I call it sharing care too, right? Who are you being? Are you all about the result and to heck with the person, right? Are you taking care of yourself so that you're accountable, awake, and aware for yourself? And that's what I say too, is you need to be that for yourself first. If you don't have practices that support yourself, you're going to come broken from the get-go to whatever conversation you're having.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
So thinking about focusing on being and focusing on practices that help, because to me, when I think about being, so much of it is around self-awareness
Yes.
and awareness
Yes.
of my surroundings and others, and where am I coming from and
Yes.
how I'm being with them. And
Yes.
so I know some of the practices that you have and that you advocate for your clients assist with becoming more aware of
Yes.
ourselves and our being. So I think it'd be good for you to share what are some of the practices that you've personally adopted on the spiritual side, the physical, and I know at one time the music side, and then
Mhm.
and then translate that into practices that leaders could adopt and use on a daily or regular basis to become more aware.
Sure. Well, I'll start with music because although when I started adopting kitty cats, if I was practicing, I had a kitty that would come up and bite my lip because it hurt her ears. But when it came to music, I was a flautist. Actually, I started young as a pianist, and I didn't like to be told when to practice. And the way I could get away with that or away from that kind of authority on my time, even as a child, I was that way. I took up the flute, and then I found myself practicing more than less because it was something that was fulfilling for me. That was my instrument. And there was a moment in time, and this we're back to high school now. There was a moment in time when I was in my room practicing. I get chills even when I think about it right now. And my dad walked in the room and he said, "Now you're producing music. Before you were playing the notes, and now it's music." I
Mm.
don't think that's the difference between doing and being. That's a pretty good example of it. So when you are a musician and you want to produce music, you have to practice the notes until they integrate with who you're being, and then it comes out as music. And when you have great orchestras or great symphonies, you get the result of all of that practice. And the same is true for an athlete. I'm certainly not a competitive athlete at this time, and I'm conscious of taking care of my body. I was a breast cancer. I'm a 30-year breast cancer survivor. So I'm a little conscious that you can be ill and not know it. I know I'm a lot conscious that you can be ill and not know it. So
Mhm.
I swim on Mondays and often Tuesdays. And then I have a workout person who works with me this morning. She worked with me. It's Wednesday in the morning. And I go to Pilates on Friday, and I'll walk to the farmer's market on Saturday. And I have an aura ring that tells me how am I doing about all of that. So I have a feedback loop on it. And that is how I stay so that I have the energy and the strength to carry on. And there are days when it's harder than others. And I know tomorrow I'll be fine. Today's just a tough day, right? It's a moment in time. It's not me.
Mhm.
And my spiritual practice is when I don't have that rigor or when I don't do those prayers that I do. And it doesn't, I mean, I'm talking not a particular religion. I'm talking spiritual, like a broader frame, like bring your religion to whatever it is. And I'm fine with that. That's my version. It's not Christianity or Judaism or da 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 or da da da, whatever it is. If it's a connection for you with a higher power, wow, right? That's what we want. That's how the coming, the energy of the oneness that we are in the world coming into me and going out of me as though I am a conduit of love and caring.
Mhm.
And that's being as well.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
I
then
can relate to that with my own morning practice.
there,
It's
yeah,
I like to say, Pamela, you'll appreciate this. I like to say I create myself every day because in
perfect.
my journal, I write, who am I being
Yes,
today? So
yes.
before I ever look at my to-do list, I'm looking at who am I being? And I describe who that person is.
Mhm.
And it's one of those, it's a way of connecting with my deeper, stronger self. I
Mhm.
see myself, as part of the whole universe. And so I'm a part of that. And so how can I bring the best of that to
Yes.
whatever I'm going to be doing on that particular day? And I love that you use the word practice because that's how we create these pathways in our brain
Mhm.
for these patterns is over and over doing these same things so
Yes.
they become natural, automatic. I loved what you shared about music and how it isn't just playing the notes, you become one, if you will, with that instrument and thinking about how can we be that way with
Mhm.
ourselves and with others. This ties all back to this whole practice of mindfulness.
It does. And there's something else you said there, Meredith, which is related, which is the pattern, right? I mean, I advise my coachees that they should look for patterns because those are instructive, so that you don't single out an individual. You say, "Here's a pattern I see. Can you see it too?" And the impact of that pattern is what we're interested in. Right. I work with paradoxes and I say the realm of the paradoxes are not good or bad. They're not right or wrong. And they have impacts on you and or others. So if you're out of balance in your communication and you're blunt and not balanced in your communication, you can kill off a room and you might not notice. Right. And if you're evasive, people want to hear from you and they're not. So that's another challenge. So all of that, the patterns are what inform us about what needs our attention, and that's big. And when you're centered, when you're what I call accountable, awake, and aware, you can be cognizant of those patterns. It's not moments. Then
Mhm.
you get active if you're only looking at the moment, but you go, I've seen that before. I wonder what the source of that is. And it's the systemic we want to be working on.
Mhm. That's so important what you've mentioned about patterns because we can go from thing to thing to thing and not recognize or take time to slow down and notice.
Yes.
For example, someone who tends to cut people off mid-sentence or come across as brusque, especially in a meeting if somebody's trying to speak, and they may not notice how folks shut down,
Yeah.
and this can happen in various situations. And to me, that's such an important part of mindfulness is
Yes.
that being aware of what impact am I having on
Yes.
other people? How are they responding to me?
Yes.
Uh, because I think sometimes we don't get the connection between the be, do, have, that gap between who we're being and the results we're either getting or not getting.
Yes.
And have you found with clients, there's a tendency to, and I hate to use the word blame, but look towards the team or somebody on the team as being the problem or the issue rather than themselves?
I was just thinking about that. So it's a great question, right? So I almost wrote a book called Beat the Blame Game Blues. I haven't written it. I did go so far as to make the cover, but then I realized there's a lot of stuff out there on that. but it's this he said, she said piece that really causes problems. It's counterintuitive, but the way for people as a leader, the way you can get people to take ownership of where they've messed up, which is authentic, which lets you solve the problem sooner and get to the solution, is to say, well, let me look over here at what I did or what I said or how I might have showed up that created this space for this to show up. So I take accountability. That's why the accountable, awake, and aware is I look here first. I'm the source because I am the leader, and culture rolls downhill, and I'm providing an example. So let's see. I was just thinking about the many conversations I've had about this over time, but I can so there was someone I coached for quite a while who really loved to get the coaching, but I was also coaching other people in the organization, and I realized that this person had a barrier from being able to hear, take ownership first, look here first, and really was never able to see the value of looking here first, because there was like almost an excuse. It was like, I'm in this practice and I'm good at that, and those people need to follow me. And it was right. The ego is the thing that got in the way. And the other people who were on his executive team just never, ever could come to trust, despite the fact that we actually had very straight conversations as a very small executive team. And we looked at this issue, and he would say yes in the moment, and then change the behavior and go back to whatever was there, and just could never see it. And of course, I didn't last very long, because when someone doesn't really want to hear the responsibility, then that's where the breakdown becomes. If somebody's doing this, they're not going to be really coachable. They have to look here first. They have to be willing to say, oh, I should probably be a leader in how I show up as an example of taking responsibility. And it's not intuitive. If you don't feel safe and you're a leader, then you likely won't provide safety for others. You've got other agendas operating in you and through you that won't allow that. So the gap I deal with as an executive coach, wanting to make the difference we talked about, is between those who need it and won't acknowledge it because of the ego, the arrogance of the ego. Not the ego itself. We all have one. We all need one. But the arrogance of the ego that says, I can't possibly be wrong. I have the authority. I have the responsibility. I've been given the title. I actually had one person I was speaking with to invite into a CEO group that I was facilitating. And I was speaking to him on the phone. And I said, so, where do you get good counsel for yourself right now? And he said, I only take my own advice. I'm like, well, that's the end of that conversation. Because if you can only take your own advice, there's not much coachability there. And I literally heard that out of his mouth as CEO. And, it's a little better now. And I'll tell you why. Because things aren't so easy that superficial reasons can create success that an executive can take credit for, not realizing that it would have been nice no matter who'd have been in charge, because of the economy or the conditions or the demand or whatever was going on. And with COVID, I don't think we make so many assumptions anymore that it's going to go our way. We really have to be accountable, awake, and aware. And especially with remote work.
Absolutely. Well, talk a bit more about what you mean when you say accountability. You've touched on it, I think, at a pretty good level with these examples of people who weren't willing to take accountability. but I find it interesting that that's first: accountability, awake, aware. So why those three and why that sequence?
Well, so the company name is Accountability Pays. And I think back 30 years ago or more, when I started the company Accountability Pays, it was more for myself, right? I needed to teach myself first. I said it was for out there, but when I look in here, I'm like, oh, I needed that lesson too 30 years ago. But the accountability is first, because if you don't look here first, then you're not going to be awake and aware of whatever else is going on outside of you. And when I say accountable, I mean that looking here first. I mean, if I've been charged with producing results through these 5 people who are my team, then I have to step up to being a leader, because managers are producing results through people, but that might not be a very friendly environment, right? So people will do what they need to do for as long as they have to do it, because their paycheck depends on it. And they may not feel the freedom to say, that's not working for me, or I'm not giving you my discretionary effort. Today, there's quiet quitting. I quit, I just didn't notify anyone. Or maybe in remote work, I have somebody else doing my job and I'm off doing something else because I'm more interested in that. Right. So there's just all kinds of weird ways that people are skirting accountability, including the leaders of teams. But that's the most damaging, because that's the cultural imprint that they're leaving on someone, whether they stay and are quiet quitting or whether they leave voluntarily. Yeah.
And so the awake,
The
what do you
awake.
mean by that? And then the aware, which we've touched on a little bit, but I would just like to hear your definition.
Right. So the accountable, awake, and aware. Awake, I would say, is present, right? It's the equivalent of being present, being here now, not off in your head, solving some other problem, tossing orders at somebody, right? The old command and control is dead, but it's still there, right? It's still in action. It's still, some of us who are old heads have been trained in the ways of, I say it, you do it. My mother, right? Don't do as I do as I say. My father, don't do as, right? I mean, that was the old way. Don't do as I do as I say. I smoke, but you shouldn't. Right? So that's the awake part. That's the being present here now for what we're doing right here and right now. And then the aware is not just what you got going on in your head, because that's the landmark way of saying this is the mind is an ugly neighborhood. Don't go there alone. Right? It isn't your friend. Right? Think about this. How do you talk to yourself? Are you as nice to yourself in your head as you are to other people you like? Right? I mean, it's like that's the management in here of, I have a practice too of, if I say something that doesn't sound right to me, even just to myself, if I put myself down, well, that was stupid, I go cancel. That's my internal way to say, wipe that, rewind that tape. So that's the aware, right? Accountable is, okay, look here first. What did I do that would have precipitated whatever's going on here that's not very good, right? And awake is being present. I'm here now and now and now, right? I'm not off in my head. I'm not on vacation already. I'm not, yeah. And then the aware is connecting the dots.
I can see where those three together are so powerful and critical, really, for leaders to carry as a part of who are they being, because all of that's connected to where am I coming from in terms of my interaction with someone. And to me, those three words just make it so easy to kind of regroup in a short period of time. Let's say you're going into an important meeting with a group, or you're having a one-on-one that you've been concerned about. but just taking time to what do I own in this?
Yes.
And how can I be totally focused on this in this moment without a lot of feelings coming up for me that I'm going to focus on instead? And just to me,
Right.
that awareness of noticing how is my body reacting? How am my emotions? How is this other person when they're
Mhm.
with, just so you have that
Right.
level of being awake. It's just,
Well, that or another equally uh, effective way to handle stuff that could be coming up is to acknowledge it, right? Say,
Mhm.
come out your mouth. I'm feeling really uncomfortable here right now. I really don't know how to talk to you about this. I've had that experience myself. I don't hang on over there with you. I'm looking over here with me to see where I might have been the cause of whatever upset is going on, and I'm not getting feedback from you. And that causes my anxiety, right? It's just being straight. And in a sense, it's backing up from the conversation that would naturally be there if there were nothing else in the space. But to just calm is to let it step over something, right? That's what I say. You, I don't need to be perfect all the time, but I also don't want to step over what's in the space. I want to bring it forward so it can be addressed. There's a lot of stepping over right now. When you have fear and no safety, which the world is in, we can't trust the media. We've got the Edelman Trust Barometer talking about there's no trust of leaders, and they've measured it for 25 years, and the trust in leadership is diminishing.
Mm.
And the Edelman Trust Barometer, if you don't know it, not you personally, but you out there ought to look it up, because it is an annual report on what is the state of trusting leaders. Because when I made that promise about leaders leading with integrity, with love, and listening for people's greatness, I then had to find the metrics that would tell me how is the world in that regard. And part
Mm.
of why I'm not retired is because those numbers are going the wrong direction. It's also, Meredith, why I created the Success Accelerators plus Action Multipliers for Time Challenge Leaders, which is a 52-week curriculum, because behavioral change isn't an overnight thing, it's a practice.
Right.
And then I was in a pilot project with that new product, which isn't out yet, by the way. It comes out June 17th. And it isn't out yet because there's a needs assessment required so that we can customize. Because here's what I learned in the pilot project that I'm running with a company that's got 1,000 employees. And that is, I'm working with the 20 people who are the operational people of that company. Leaders won't take care of themselves. They won't do the work without some coaching. They
Mm.
need, they need, they don't always want, but they need the support. So I've said, all right, it's not just this learning management system where you can download the email and the PDF. By the way, that PDF includes the opportunity for journaling, because I'm with you. It's really good and really important. Or it asks questions about how to talk to your team or how to find out from your team what you need. And then there's a 1 to 3 minute video of me supplementing what was in that PDF. Very quick, half a page Success Accelerators, half a page Action Multipliers, Time Challenge Leaders. Here you go. But the practice of it is not count onable. Somebody has to pay for and get coaching. So it won't necessarily be me. I have a pool of people I'd like to bring in who are familiar with the assessment that I use. It's all based on a framework, the 7 dimensions of team power. And what does it take? Right? From trusting and trustworthy, which are two separate things, but both very core, all the way up to producing results, right? So it's, what does it take? That's not everything. We couldn't talk about everything here that goes into being an effective leader, and we can be on that journey. We can
Mhm.
put the practices in. We can be consistent in our practices, consistent in recognizing we can't do anything alone. We can't do anything alone. You know, we just can't. We look at the trust of leaders. Where did the leaders go wrong that we can't trust them? Where did the press, where was the conversations we used to be able to have at the dining room table to say, well, here's what I heard. Well, here's what I heard. Oh, let's look at both and figure out what's really true for us. Now, those opportunities are gone because the media isn't telling everybody the same truth. They have their own versions of the truth, and it's really bad.
Mhm.
So we have a less trusting environment, which means that leadership has to be more trustworthy than ever, ever, ever before in the history of collecting the data.
Let's go deeper with that, because I agree with you 100% about the need for being trustworthy. And I would love for you to share from your experience working with leaders over the years, when you have helped them realize how important that is. What are the things you have helped them realize, learn, so they can be someone, thinking about who they are being? How can they be someone who conveys trustworthiness?
Well, it's a really great question. The way I actually get at that is by using an assessment that measures 175 behavioral preferences and tendencies. And inside of those 175 behavioral preferences and tendencies are 12 paradoxical pairs. You know, tough love, right? Holding the tension between them. Well, we have blind spots about ourselves. We think we're good at some things, or we think we know some things, and then we turn out we don't. And I'll tell one on myself first. So when I took this assessment, which was 25 years ago, I realized, oh my gosh, I have a ton of desire to experiment, try new things and new ways of doing things. And that's the support trait. And on the paradox side, the dynamic trait is persistence, sticking with it. I was like, on a 2 to 10 scale, I was a 10 on experimenting, and I was a 3 on persistent. And I went, holy moly, chasing shiny objects, right? That's me, right? And I could look around. It was true about houses and cities and husbands, and it just went on. I have to tell you, I'm on marriage number 3, right? Not just my work, because it was a work preferences assessment, but also in my personal life, I could see the collateral damage. And I went, wow, that's really a blind spot. Well, in that particular case, all I really had to learn to do was stick around. And I'll tell you what, I tested my persistence in the last 2 years as I was building these 52 learning modules, which is the thread of continuity or across the 52 weeks of practicing being a leader and learning what are the thread of things that need to be a part of that. Sometimes I can praise myself and go, wow. So back to that pilot project. One of the things that the operations group is, they're still in it. They're in the last couple of months. But 8 months in, the finance manager had said, I have 60% turnover. And so he came to these Success Accelerator events weekly, managed by the woman who had said yes to me and was inside, not by me, but by her. And then he brought his supervisors with him. And 8 months later, that turnover was down to 30%. And the hard cost savings over that 8 months was $70,000. Just in that one measurable change. So the trusting is trusting you to look out for my well-being, not just the department, not just yourself, not just your, right? I mean, you know, there are managers who keep good people to make themselves look good. And then there are leaders who want and care for the careers of the people who work for them. And I know one of those who I had the privilege of working with a number of years ago, who just retired from a very large corporation where she had been the sustainability officer, the person who did the corporate responsibility work. And everybody wanted to work with her because they knew if they got in her department, she would help them find their full self-expression. That is leadership. That's in service of the person who's working with you, not in service of your own ego feed because
Mhm.
you're producing results that make your pay go up, right? That's the give and take of it. So when I say trustworthy, or when you say trustworthy, that means I can trust you to not just take care of yourself or the department or the company, but me,
Mhm.
your arms and legs for what needs to be done around here. The doing being continuum, the being is what I trust. The doing and the having is what you get when I trust you, and I'll do with my discretionary effort what you need. I'll
Mhm.
I'll follow you to the moon if you're a leader. I'll do it as a task until I don't have to do it, or I can figure out how to get away from you as a manager who doesn't care about me.
Yeah. As I was hearing you describe that woman, I was thinking about how trustworthiness is so much more than I've got your back.
Yes.
You look at what she did, she fulfills that third element of your purpose, this bringing out the greatness of others.
Yes.
Who would not
Yes.
want to work for someone who sees your potential and
Yes.
then both demands and encourages the evolution of your best self in the
Yes.
process of giving you
Yes.
challenging projects, and yet knowing that person's going to be there encouraging and supporting and coaching you as you're working on that. What a powerful example of an effective leader.
Yes. And you know what goes around comes around. Now I'm in dialogue with that woman because she's someone I totally admire. I have interviewed her, and she is now in a partnership with someone who had been in and out of her department a number of times. She'd had tremendous respect for this other woman who then went on to do other things. And now their partners are both retired and they're partners. So what goes around comes around. How you show up for other people rewards you in unknown, unidentified ways. It's
Mhm.
just as you give, you do receive, right? It's a boomerang. You send it out, you're going to get it back, right? However, you say that, it's a universal principle. It's not
It
something.
is. Yes, it is. And you know what else it reminds me of as I'm thinking of kind of pulling everything together that we've been talking about? If you focus on who you're being first, then you can more easily let go of the outcomes. You're not trying to control as much of who does what, and that need to micromanage, because you're coming from a place of trusting yourself and then trusting others, and how you're being there just has such a positive impact on those around you. I think that that's a core element of what we've been talking about here. And mindfulness is sort of the underlying principle of it all.
That is incredibly well said, Meredith.
Thank you.
Yeah, right.
Well, I
It's
was
just,
inspired by our conversation to, because that's part of what I love doing in these conversations in my podcast, is listening for the threads and then pulling it together, kind of synthesizing it, in summarizing where we've been in this conversation. And I'm so excited for this new program that you have, because I know it's going to have such a powerful impact. And it's so aligned with, our own philosophy about what an effective program should be, in terms of lots of practice, lots of opportunity to really use the material and not just have head knowledge. So, as we're wrapping up, Pamela, tell people how they can connect with you and how they can learn more about this new program, and say the name again and what you have coming up that's so exciting.
Sure. It's called Success Accelerators plus Action Multipliers. And that's the end of the registered trademark park. But the important thing is it's leadership mindfulness for time challenged leaders, because we all know the demands on people are more and more all the time. I think that I wanted to say something, but now I think it slipped away. I don't know, but in your wrap up, I think you said it well, that what we want to do, that the part that I think is important for me to be responsible for is that when I speak to people who are responsible for the doing and the having, that I need to tie somehow, or they need to tie somehow together the being, right, the leadership behavior with the ROI and the KPIs. So that's what the needs assessment is for, is to say, how well do you understand the alignment between the leadership behavior, the ROIs, and the KPIs? So in my needs assessment, I'm asking for a read, if you will, that whole 360 where it's needed. Maybe a leader and an emerging leader, or let's just use that as an example, to say, how accountable, awake, and aware are we already? And where's the need for that coaching? Because the continuity of the thread of the curriculum, I'm clear, is going to contribute. And it's what you pick up and how you use it that is relevant to you that I want to suss out, if you will. That's the English way of saying figure it out, or have you figure it out, because that gives you the power and give us the knowledge to know what you need, so that you can get what you need out of it in terms of the doing and having. And we can focus on the connection between who you're being and how that derives the results you're looking for through the people you're working with. Did that make sense?
Yes. And I would love for you, because I know this episode will be going live around the time that you're launching this new program. And so we will be sure to put the website for that in the show notes, and any other information you'd like us to include. How can people, though, connect with you, Pamela, so they can get on your list, learn more about what's coming?
Sure. So my email is pstambaugh@accountabilitypays.com. The company name is accountabilitypays.com. And my website is accountabilitypays.com. So you can find everything there. And it's definitely from right where we are at the moment on April 24th. We're launching on June 17th. There will be changes to that website in that interim period that will get more specifically aligned with what we're up to. But right now you can see where I am, and you can see how to reach me, and you can see who I am.
That's great. Well, thank you so much, Pamela, for joining me today, and for what I know is going to be a really valuable conversation for my audience around this idea of being accountable, awake, and aware, and having mindfulness be such an important part of who they are being, so they're the most effective leaders possible. Thank you.
Thank you. Terrific.
Thanks for tuning into my podcast. Now head over to growstrongleaders.com and check out our 2 books, Connect with Your Team and Peer Coaching Made Simple. While you're there, download the free facilitator guide to find out how to implement our unique peer coaching system. Until next time, I'm Meredith Bell.